does the group have to be in order to be a group? Actually, it only has to be more than one guy, more than one individual, in order to be a group. Two or more people who interact with and influence one another, and in so doing consider themselves as a group, of course. So if you have a significant other, then the two of you are a group. Your family is a group. Your extended family is a group. Your tribe is a group. Us as Americans, we're a group. You may feel like you're a member of the world community, and that would be a group. The human brain is adapted to maintain cohesion in groups up to about 150 people. Now, the interesting thing is, if we look at hunter-gatherers around the world, if we look at the history of hunter-gatherers around the world, if we look at indigenous peoples of the Americas, what we see is villages of about 150 people. They were rarely larger than that. If we look at the buffalo hunting groups in the northern plains, they always wandered around in groups of about 150, as bizarre as that sounds. So we can go to Africa, we can go to New Guinea, we can go to Australia, we can go to Canada. It doesn't really matter where we go. If the group allows itself to form itself, then it's usually right around 150 people or less, never any larger. Any bigger than that and it's too unwieldy and people don't feel comfortable. Most groups contain less than 4 people, of course, but if we're talking about an organization, we're talking about a group of people of about 150. Groups normally last for an extended length of time, like your family and like you and your significant other. But as in the case of fans at an athletic event, it may only be a few moments. I was watching a baseball game, not last night, but the night before last. And it was the Dodgers versus the Giants. And the people that were Giants fans were all sitting in one section, and the people that were Dodgers fans, of course, were all around them. It was in Dodger Stadium, so there were a lot more Dodgers fans. But it seemed like people were collecting in these groups of blue and groups of black and orange. The Giants are black and orange, and the Dodgers are blue, of course. Social psychologists feel that groups exist because people need to feel a sense of belonging in many of the things that they do, and this is known as affiliation. So this is one of the reasons why there are people who are white supremacists. This is one of the reasons why people join, I don't know, the Lions Club or the Rotarians. Sadly enough, of course, we have this feeling, we have this need to join groups. We have this, and this is one of the reasons why churches are so popular. Some people may not even believe in God, but at the same time, they feel like they need to be part of a group, so they will join a church, even if that church doesn't fit their belief system. My wife has done this. She's a Presbyterian, and if she goes someplace where there is no Presbyterian church, she'll just join a church. And she's been a Lutheran, she's been a Methodist, she's been what else has she been? Episcopalian. She's gone to Episcopalian churches, mainly because she wanted to feel like she was part of that group. So she joined those churches, despite the fact that she's not an Episcopalian. She's a Presbyterian. She's not an Episcopalian, Methodist, or Lutheran. One of the oldest concepts in social psychology is that people perform better and faster when in the presence of other people, and this is known as social facilitation. Social facilitation. The concept of social facilitation not only includes athletic events, but also is present in all species and most activities, including sexual activities among breeding pairs of rats. As bizarre as it seems, 2 rats who are breeding need spectators, and if they don't have any spectators, they won't perform. The male will not impregnate the female. They need spectators, as strange as that may seem. To humans, of course, this is an animal species. But they're not the only ones. We can look at many different species of animals, and spectators are needed as part of the group for one individual to impregnate another. Chimpanzees are that way. Chimpanzees, it's a group behavior, even though sometimes the mating pair will wander off into the forest. Very often, of course, they need spectators in order to perform the sex act. However, social facilitation does not always take place. In fact, with more complex activities, the presence of others actually tends to hinder performance. So the more complex the activity, the fewer people you need around in order to perform well. The less complex it is, of course, the more people will add to your performance. According to the work by Robert Zients, the anxiety caused by the presence of others inhibits complex tasks, but it facilitates simple tasks, which is fairly logical. So it's a lot easier for a quarterback to perform, which is a very complex task, completing a pass. A little bit easier for him if it's just he and the team. In practice, he can do it, and in competition, it's a little bit more difficult. Linemen, on the other hand, in practice, they don't hit very hard, but in a game, they hit very, very hard. Athletes tend to be more energized when they are given support. For this reason, home field advantage is very important, since the athletes are more likely to be supported in their own territory. This is no more true in any sport than soccer, where almost 70% of the games are won by the home team. This is really important because if you look at all the soccer leagues around the world, the Spanish League, the British Premier League, the Bundesliga in Germany, these teams, they get more points if they win on the road than if they win at home. If they win at home, they get 2 points, and if they win on the road, they get 3 points. So that's how they win the league, is by winning on the road. But they also have to win at home, every game at home. And they tend to. While individuals tend to gain comfort from being around other people, too many people tend to have the opposite effect. When people are crammed in shoulder to shoulder, they tend to have the same reactions. That close together, people tend to have higher pulse rates and blood pressure. So if you've ever been in a classroom where it was packed people were packed shoulder to shoulder, you probably didn't learn nearly as much as you do in this environment, where there's 2 seats between at least everybody. As you, I didn't do this. You guys decided where you'd sit down. Nicholas Cottrell feels that the reason individuals perform differently when people are watching is because the individual is concerned about how others are evaluating them. Researchers have discovered that people perform better when their co-actor is slightly superior to them. So if you compete with an individual that's a little bit better than you are, then you are more likely to compete at a very high level. Arousal decreases when a high-status group is diluted with people that perform the people the performer doesn't care about. So if you're on a team with your friends, you're more likely to give an optimum effort. If you're on a team with people you don't know, you're not going to perform at such a high level. People who worry about evaluations are the ones most affected by their presence. And this is really kind of interesting, and this is one of the reasons why coaching is so difficult. Sometimes you'll have individuals that don't really care about other individuals on the team, and you'll have others that care so much about your evaluation that you have to pay attention to that person all the time. A lot of people are easy to coach because they just perform. Other individuals, you need to continually give them feedback. You need to continually be building them up in order to get them to perform at a high level. These are the individuals that are seeking evaluation. And of course, these are the ones that are more difficult to coach. I've been a coach. Well, as you can see, I was a coach. That's what it says on my board. I coached soccer. Really kind of interesting. Of course, I'm a psychologist, so I recognize this anyway. If you've got a coach like Bobby Knight, who tends to treat everybody the same, he had a difficult time with individuals that required a lot of individual care, individuals that were seeking evaluation. Social pressure is the most intense when the people are unfamiliar and hard to keep an eye on, of course. Researchers have found that when a performer is distracted, they are more aroused, whether the distraction is human or not. Robert Zients has shown that people react to the presence of another person, whether they are evaluating or not. Joggers are energized when running with someone else, no matter how good they are. I was running my wife was stationed in Japan, and I couldn't find a job. I mean, I was in Japan, I couldn't work off base, so I had to find a job on base. So I was running a lot. I was running in the morning and I was running in the evening. I had a 3-mile loop that I ran. It was a 3-mile loop that just about everybody ran. Anyway, I was timing myself, and I was trying to get better, and I was improving by a second here and a second there. You know, just about every time I went out, I improved a little bit, but not a whole lot. So one time I went out, and there was a guy that was about 100 yards in front of me. And so I decided, I actually didn't even think about it. I just caught him. And he was moving pretty good. And I didn't realize I was running any faster. I felt the same as I did otherwise, and we turned around, and he saw me, and he started kicking it in a little bit more. He put a better effort on it when he realized that I was there. It was a loop, so we kind of passed each other. And when he saw that I was there, he took off. And I stayed with him. Just before the end, just before the 3-mile mark, he curved off to go to the gym, and I curved off to go to my house. And we were moving pretty good. And usually I just sprinted to my house. It wasn't that far. It was maybe 200 or 300 yards, not that much. So I'd kick it in at the end, trying to get the best time I could. So I normally improved about a second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Anything was okay. That day I improved a minute and a half because I was running against somebody else. And I felt the same. As a matter of fact, when I finished, I wasn't even breathing hard, as strange as that may seem. Anyway, so I had run faster just because I was running with somebody, and I normally didn't run with anybody.
So it's good to have competition.
I had competition. And he felt that we were competing against one another, so he was moving faster himself. Researchers have discovered that when people are working in a group project, people tend to exert less effort toward a common goal than if people are being held accountable individually. And this is known as social loafing. So, and this is one of the reasons why I don't like groups. I don't put you guys into groups to do a group project. The reason is because what tends to happen is one or two people will be the two people that do all the work, and the other people do jack squat. I don't know if you've noticed this, but yeah, that's fine. Anyway, that's known as social loafing. So the people that care about their grade will work really, really hard, and the people that don't, they know that they're going to get a good grade anyway, because a better grade than they would if they put forth any effort, if they did it themselves. So they just don't do anything. John Sweeney refers to the people benefiting from social loafing as free riders, individuals who benefit from the group but give little effort in return. So you can refer to it as social loafing and the individuals as free riders. One of the downfalls of communism was the prevalence of social loafing. If you tried hard, you didn't get anything for it. And because of that, there were a lot of people that just didn't do anything. And this is one of the problems with socialism. Everybody gets the same thing. When the individual is paid for their work, then it's a little bit different. When I was working in a automotive pumps and parts factory, and we were doing piecework. Well, geez, you know, if you tell me that you're going to pay me for every piece I manufacture, I'm going to make as many pieces as I possibly can. And that's exactly what happened. I was just pumping out parts like crazy. The union came and they told me to slow down because I was messing up the average. I was making too many parts and it made them look bad. They didn't like piecework because they would rather just go at a certain pace. So what they would do is instead of me having an unlimited amount of parts that I could make, they would only give me a certain number of parts, and I'd make them all, and then in 15 minutes, and then I'd get the next 45 minutes off, which wasn't really right. But they were controlling how many parts that I could possibly manufacture. The union was. It's kind of a rip-off. I never made more money, but they wouldn't let me. I could have made like 4 times the amount of money anybody else made. Of course, I was young and I was stupid, so I just worked like crazy. And they're just working real slow because, I mean, they've been doing this for 150 years. They've been working for a long time. And me, I just got there over the summer, so I was just trying to pump out as many parts as possible. So I got in a lot of trouble. They threatened to beat me up and stuff like that. It's easy to hit like a guy that's only 5'6". I only weighed like 120 pounds at the time. With no impetus to stick out and no incentive to improve, production in communist countries stagnated. While in private production of agriculture, the people outstripped themselves and their neighbors when allowed to grow their own food on less land. So it wasn't the fact that they were lazy, it was the fact that they didn't get anything for it, and because of that they didn't work very hard. But when they were working for themselves, just like me, when I was doing piecework, I pumped out as many parts as I possibly can. They did exactly the same thing. People will still watch public television, though they refuse to contribute money to it. I don't know if you watch public television. I contribute money to public television in Iowa, but I don't watch public television in Iowa. I watched public television in New Mexico, but I don't contribute any money to public television in New Mexico. The reason is because their public television is crap. It's really not very good. Too much music, not enough shows. They need more shows. But in Iowa, they have lots of shows. Shows are expensive. Music is cheap. On challenging tasks, when an individual perceives their portion of the work as indispensable, they work harder. So if you think that your work is important, then you're going to work your tail off. They also work harder when they consider other individuals in their group as unreliable. This happened in the military. I knew those lazy city people were not going to get the damn job done. So I busted my tail to get it done. And of course they knew I was going to do it, so they didn't do anything. Social loafing once again. And who took credit for getting all the work done? Yeah, well, they tried to anyway. An individual will work harder when their performance will bring select rewards, as with stock options. My dad used to work in a bank, and they were paying him with stock options. And they gave him an option. They said, you know, we'll pay you $100 more paycheck, or we'll give you, several shares of stock. And he figured, well, geez, I can accumulate all this stock. And he did. He accumulated like $1 million worth of stock. That's my dad. Smart guy. And then George W. Bush became president. And the bottom fell out of the stock market. And he lost like $500,000. I know.
Gotta know when to hold them.
And then he died.
Know when to fold them.
Well, yeah, know when to hold them, know when to fold them. know who to elect president and know who not to elect president. Damn it, he voted for George W. Bush. He was pissed. And he was sick too. I mean, he died right after that. So we lost $500,000 just by electing the wrong.
During the recession?
Yeah, during the recession. At the beginning of the recession. I mean, I had a what do they call that money thing? Anyway, I had like $73,000 in a IRA, and I had to sell it for like $30,000. I lost, $45,000 just because of George W. Bush was the president, and the bottom fell out of the stock market. So all that money that I had accumulated, it just disappeared. I was losing money every month. You pump money into it every month, and then they buy stocks with it, and then you make more money. And this is theoretically your retirement. I lost 2/3 of my investment right there. I mean, it was nuts. I think I'm doing the same thing here, but the economy's a little bit better for right now anyway. IRA, I had an IRA. Anyway, I had to sell it. It was a ripoff. I just got messed over.
Does the college offer a Roth IRA?
Yeah, they do. Yeah. Your dad's probably got one, right? I imagine.
Cash it out. I know I guess it does because other tribal employees, I know because my aunt has a Roth.
Yeah. I don't think I do because I'm about to retire anyway, so I don't think I do. Well, I don't know. My wife is an MBA, and I'm a psychologist, so I don't really care about this stuff. I figure I can live off of Social Security. No, I can't. If I never drive any place and I eat beans, I should be okay. People tend to loaf less when the other members of their group are considered friends rather than strangers. And this is one of the reasons why in military units, group cohesiveness is so important, because you're fighting for your buddies. If you just join a group, which happens from time to time, you're less likely to try to protect those individuals. I mean, you always want to protect the guy that's standing beside you, but you're more likely to do that if this is your friend than if you don't know that guy from anybody else. People in collectivist cultures social loaf less than people in individualistic cultures. Women who tend to be less individualistic than men social loaf less than men do. People are more likely to work hard when there are challenging objectives. They are rewarded for group success. There is a spirit of commitment to the team. And of course, we just changed our structure in the school. They've expanded the schools. We have new deans that we didn't have before. So all of a sudden we've got the whole structure of the school is completely different. You may have noticed, I hope you didn't, but they put the business and the social sciences together for no reason whatsoever. So we used to have 8 schools, and now we have 4. The problem is that you throw people that don't have anything to do with each other together, and all of a sudden there is no cohesiveness. And this is the problem that we've had in the business and social science department.
I always wondered why. I was always trying to when they put this together, trying to figure out what the relation was, why they put it together. I couldn't figure it out.
There is a reason for it. The reason is because we both have BA programs, and we represent about 2/3 of all the students in the school. Yeah.
I thought it was to save money, maybe less head.
I have no idea.
You think they'll split it again eventually if both departments go?
Well, there are departments that are having problems, like your dad's department's having problems, that I understand. Because they have to meet as a group, but there's so much friction in the group that they split into their
camps.
departments again. Yeah, exactly. So I think your dad's group is in with Fine arts? Is it fine arts?
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure either. Anyway, they don't meet together anymore.
You know what would be interesting is if someone did a study about groups working together on the reservation, because it always happens. It doesn't matter if it's here at Diné College, or Chinle School District in Winter Rock, if it's in a behavioral health department at IHS, people always coalesce into separate camps.
Sure.
It's weird.
Well, yesterday I was talking to somebody and they were telling me that the people that live in the middle of the reservation feel more cohesiveness than the people that live on the periphery. The border, they call them border Navajos, and I'd never heard the term before. They also call them traders, but that was surprised. I'd never heard that term before. I just thought everybody got along, but the reality is, if you live in Crown Point, I guess, or if you had something to do with Fort Wingate, or if you were over by Flagstaff, the closer you are to not being in the middle, the more likely that people see you as different. And I didn't understand that. I didn't realize that. So, I don't know. I just figured everybody was the same. I can't tell. I can't look at you guys and tell you where you're from. You look like you're from Tienda. No.
I just always noticed that the ones that can't speak Navajo, that don't have a strong grasp on the Navajo language, seem to articulate themselves out of the group, and then they coalesce again amongst themselves.
Are those the border?
I don't know that. It's just a language. I just always notice it revolves around language a lot of times.
It's a nice way to look at it, I guess. I'm not exactly sure how accurate that is. Zimbardo, we talk about Zimbardo all the time. Zimbardo is one of the significant experiments that has been done. Zimbardo in his Stanford prison study. And we're going to go through it right now. It's really kind of odd. You couldn't do this today. You couldn't do the prison study today. There was too much psychological damage that was done. And Zimbardo realized that afterwards. Zimbardo's still out there, and he's still writing books. He did this experiment in 1973 at Stanford. He was a brand new psychology professor. He was trying to make his mark in psychology, and he did. This is in every psychology book. We could be reading out of the Zimbardo social psychology book, but I don't especially like it. It's more West Coast centric. Some books are West Coast centric. Some books are Harvard, Yale, East Coast centric. I'd rather have a book from the middle of the country, because that seems like it's a more realistic group. Instead of ignoring everybody else, the people in the middle, they recognize the West Coast, they recognize the East Coast, and they talk about the middle of the country as well. But if you read a West Coast book, they only talk about the West Coast. They act like the East Coast doesn't exist. In the middle of the country, those people aren't real. It's really kind of strange. So when I choose a textbook, I always try to choose one from an author from the middle of the country. Somebody from Michigan, or somebody from Iowa, or somebody from Illinois. I try to stay away from the South. Southern authors tend to call slavery servant. They were servants instead of slaves. So I try to stay away from those guys. Anyway, so Zimbardo's group built a mock prison in the basement of the psychology department at Stanford University and paid students to play the role of guards or prisoners. The role students played was determined by a flip of the coin. So he didn't say, "You look mean, I think I'll make you a guard." That's not the way it worked. You were either a guard or a prisoner, and it all depended on the flip of the coin. The guards were outfitted with a uniform of khaki shirts and pants. They had a whistle and a police nightstick and reflecting sunglasses. Why the reflecting sunglasses? Why would you?
So you can't see their eyes.
So they can't see their eyes, exactly. And they can hide behind the sunglasses.
It's like a mask.
Yes, exactly. We're going to talk about that in just a second. The prisoners were outfitted with a loose-fitting smocks with an identification number stamped on it They had rubber sandals, they had a cap made from a nylon stocking, and they had a locked chain attached to one ankle, not to both ankles, so they only had it on one ankle, and that gave them the idea that they were prisoners. The experiment started with prisoners being rounded up by arresting them on campus, handcuffing them, and bringing them to the makeshift jail. The experiment was supposed to last for 2 weeks. Now remember, this is Stanford University. That's good, I like your sunglasses.
The sun came out.
You're hiding from us. Okay, that's good.
Oh no.
Which is kind of interesting. Everybody has glasses on except the two of us. Oh, there you go. Now you got your glasses on. Do you feel safe behind your glasses? Do you feel safer behind your glasses? If you take your glasses off, do you feel vulnerable?
Can't see without your glasses.
If you can't see without your glasses, of course you're going to feel vulnerable. My wife, even when she wore contact lenses, she didn't like it because she felt more vulnerable. She felt like her eyes were being protected, and that nothing could hurt her, could hit her in the face. Now, I don't know how many times you've been punched in the face or hit in the eyes. Not at all. Yeah, of course not. And do you ever worn glasses? Oh. So, but you've never been hit in the eyes? But people that wear glasses feel safe because their eyes are being protected by their glasses. Yeah. I've never been hit in the eye either. I'm really good at ducking. I've been hit here. I've been hit here. I've been punched in the forehead. That was kind of bizarre. The guy was hitting me with a beer bottle, swung a beer bottle at me, and I ducked and hit me right here. At least he missed my eyes. He was trying to hit me right here. Anyway, he missed me at the last second. I wasn't drinking, okay? He was drinking, and he was trying to hit me because big guys like to hit little guys. That's the way it works. Anyway, okay, so they were supposed to last for 2 weeks. And these are actual, you can watch the film. It lasts for about an hour and 20 minutes. It's really kind of interesting. They just made a movie of this, actually, a couple of years ago. The study was to see if they could get these elite college students, and they were elite college students. They went to Stanford. These weren't bums off the street. These weren't the athletes from the jock department.
Thinkers.
These were psychologists. These are the individuals that are PhDs today. They were the elite of the school. And of course, he made them guards and prisoners. The experiment was way too successful as the students quickly adopted into their roles, despite the fact that these were rich kids. There's no reason they should have adopted into these roles of being a prisoner and being a prison guard, which isn't the easiest thing in the world. The experiment had to be ended in only 6 days. Now here's the bizarre part. The guards were very creative in their abuse, their verbal harassment, their humiliation of the prisoners. Torture was not unknown, and the warden, who was Philip Zimbardo himself, watched and tacitly approved of what was going on. He filled the role of the warden, and he watched all this stuff, and he just let it go. Now here's the strange part. Philip Zimbardo was dating a graduate student, which he wasn't supposed to do, but that's not important.
She was a prisoner?
No, she came in and she saw what was going on, and she told him, look, you got to stop this or something bad's going to happen. If she hadn't come in and if he hadn't been dating a psychology graduate student, she wouldn't have come in. They could have done lots and lots of damage, and this experiment would have just imploded. It would have destroyed the school. But that's not what happened. She came in and she saw that there were select individuals that were really reacting negatively to this experiment. Most of them were the prisoners. The guards became abusive, extremely abusive, despite who they were before as a guard, as a member of this experiment. They were play acting. But they still fulfilled these roles, and some of the prisoners actually had mental breakdowns. There's one individual that after 2 days in prison, they had to take him out of the prison. They had to allow him to leave. There was another individual who wrote his priest and said he was going to commit suicide. And he snuck the note out, got to the priest came in, and they wouldn't let the priest see him, but they released that prisoner as well. And then, of course, the graduate student came in and said, you're not seeing what's actually happening here. Why have you changed? Now, the other thing that happened was she broke up with Zimbardo because she saw Zimbardo as a cruel individual. He was allowing all this cruelty to take place, so she didn't want to have anything to do with him after that. As interesting as this was. So they did a lot of horrible things. They put paper bags over the individuals' heads. They used nudity to humiliate the prisoners. Everybody was male. There were no females involved in this. So they'd strip them down and they'd make them wander around naked, and they would make fun of their nudity. They even changed guards, and these guards immediately slipped into the same roles. So they thought maybe they picked some guys that were psychopaths. So they released those guys, and they brought other people in, and the nicest people they could find, and they made them guards, and all of a sudden they turned mean. As bizarre as it may seem. The prisoners almost immediately took on the role of someone without hope. They became passive, they acted helpless. They started withdrawing from one another. Some prisoners became so anxious and depressed they had to be released early to save their sanity. I told you of the two cases. Other prisoners planned escapes and retaliations against the guards. They had to keep these people apart even after the experiment was over with, because they were afraid that some of the prisoners would gang up and beat up the guards, because that's actually what was happening. That's actually what was happening. In 2004, American military guards routinely abused prisoners in Abu Ghraib, a prison in Iraq. They physically beat them, they sexually abused them, and they psychologically humiliated them. The American public was shocked by the pictures of these abuses. A few bad apples happened to end up in the unit guarding the prisoners, and that's just not what Zimbardo found. Zimbardo found that when you do something, you take on the role of that act. He says it's not the bad apples, it's the barrel that's bad. The prison is bad. The whole idea of a prison is bad. And of course, these are some of the pictures that came out of Abu Ghraib. This is a female guard, and this individual is naked. And if you know anything about the Muslim religion, males are not supposed to display themselves to females. They're not supposed to subordinate themselves to females. And here she's got a dog collar, a dog leash on an individual that's naked. There's an individual walking naked. They've got, remember the Zimbardo experiment where they put the paper bags over their heads? They were doing the same thing with these guys.
I think these were taken early on. When I went there, the windows were all blacked out.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, they were denying them sunlight as well. When I went there, I noticed that.
2000, you were there after 2000.
I was there in the beginning of 05. They had, at that point, they had stopped. They actually closed down that side of the prison where all this stuff took place. When we went in there, and I got to see that whole area, and you could see there was areas where, from other stuff too, because Saddam ran that prison, there was blood stains on the floor where they executed people.
Right.
And all the windows were blacked out too. So it was a really weird place.
The unit that was in charge of the prison were National Guard. Yeah. So these guys weren't professional soldiers, not really. They were weekend warriors, as it were. So they, if you're active duty, of course, you're in the military 24/7. While you're on active duty, of course, you're 24/7. But these guys had spent, about 10 or 15 years in the service as military people. They went home every week. They only played Army once every 2 weeks for 2 days on the weekend.
They were on their own a lot of the time too, because Abu Ghraib is kind of like a compound, and they had CIA there. They had different people operating out of there, but everybody was off, just doing their own thing.
Everybody was
and
doing.
so they were left to their own devices. There was no oversight.
And look at all the stuff that they did. Yeah, they covered this guy with human waste, and of course they had the homosexuality is not something that they talk about in the Arab world, and of course they made these men climb on top of each other naked, and this is the female guard.
You know, the worst part about this is Abu Ghraib is a big place, and they brought in thousands of people in it. A lot of times they would go to an area and do a raid and just arrest everybody that was a military age male. It didn't matter if you were a part of whatever was suspected of going on, they just rounded everybody up and took them there. So there were, most of the people that were actually innocent, and people that came out that had spent time there, and then they would eventually get released after some time, but they had been, I guess you could say, tortured, mentally tortured for so long that when they came out hating the U.S. This probably actually expanded, made the war a lot longer.
Isn't that stupid? Well, the biggest problem we had in Iraq was we had no plan to get out. We didn't know what we were doing. We didn't know what the end game was. We destroyed the infrastructure of the country, and then we didn't have any plan after that. We just wanted to win the war. Well, okay, we won the war, but now we lost the peace, as it were. Of course, the same thing happened in Vietnam.
Yeah, they had no plan for that place either. Like all those people that were being detained, were just being detained indefinitely on suspicion of crime, but they never got to see a judge. It wasn't until they started right before we got there, and they started to be able to see judges that were half military JAG officers and half civilians, and a lot of them were. I was just going to get water, and they got arrested.
Captured me because.
So a lot of them got at least started getting. They actually closed the prison down in the middle of 06.
Yeah, but it was a shock. It was a shock to people in the United States. We thought we were the good guys. We were going in to find weapons of mass destruction. We were freeing the Iraqi people from the tyranny of Saddam Hussein, and then we pulled this kind of stuff. This is not something that Americans see themselves doing, and of course, people were really upset about it. Group cohesiveness. Are the qualities of a group that bind members together and promote liking between members. The more cohesive a group is, the more its members are likely to stay in the group, to take part in group activities, to try to recruit new like members. And of course, this is a picture of, well, it's a white supremacy group, as you can see from the one symbol. But people have used the Confederate battle flag as actually the battle flag of Northern Virginia. To bring like-minded people together. And that was the whole idea of Charlottesville. They were going to bring all these individuals together. They were talking about destroying the Confederate, not destroying them, but removing the Confederate statues in Charlottesville, the Lee area in the middle of Charlottesville, and of course they had they used this symbol. So now, and for a long time, of course, there were lots of states that used to fly the Confederate battle flag, which was a little odd, since the Civil War ended up about 150 years ago, and here they're still flying the Confederate battle flag over the state capitals. Now they've all taken them down. Even South Carolina, which was the most adamant about keeping the battle flag, has taken the flag down. That was the lady, the Indian American lady. She's from.
Oh, that was the UN ambassador.
Yeah, the UN ambassador, Nikki Haley. Nikki Haley. I remembered her last name, couldn't remember her first name. So the more cohesive the group, the more likely that the group will stay together. And I just used that as an example. If task requires close cooperation, cohesiveness helps performance. Cohesiveness can interfere with optimal performance. An example is Kennedy and his administration dealing with the Bay of Pigs incident. Because the incident happened at the beginning of the Kennedy administration, and people around Kennedy were a tightly knit group, no one argued against Kennedy's decision to allow the Bay of Pigs to take place. And because of the Bay of Pigs was an abysmal failure, the Cuban exiles were defeated in about 2 days. They were doing okay as long as they had CIA backing, but as soon as the CIA pulled out, as soon as Kennedy realized what was going on and pulled the CIA support, they just collapsed. They just completely collapsed. He was convinced that that Cubans really did want they wanted Batista to come back. They didn't like the communist rule, but of course, and a lot of the wealthy Cubans had fled to the United States. They were the ones that put this army together. They were the ones that trained the army, and they were the ones that armed the army. Of course, once they got into Cuba, there was no general uprising of people, of like-minded people. The communists were pretty much in charge, and when Kennedy saw what was going on, he realized that in order to support them any further, he would have to send in his own troops. And of course, we weren't willing to do that. We had just backed Castro's overtaking of Cuba, so it wouldn't have made any sense. As soon as he pulled the CIA from the scene, they just collapsed. Group members tend to be alike in age, sex, beliefs, race, ethnicity, and opinions. Why are they so similar? The reason is because they are attracted to and likely recruit similar others. So if you're around a select group of individuals, the individual that you're the most likely to try to recruit to your group is someone just like you. So you will look at all the people that are out there, and you will select the individual that is the most like you. The groups operate in ways that encourage similarity in their members, like Zoltan. I don't know if you remember Zoltan.
That's a long time ago.
Yeah. Well, I just showed the movie a couple of weeks ago. Homogeneous groups are more cohesive, of course. Diverse groups perform better. Homogeneous groups, everybody has the same idea, and a lot of times they just kind of get stuck in a rut. But diverse groups, of course, have different ideas, and they tend to be more successful. To examine the relationship between a business's performance and its racial and gender diversity, Herring in 2009 conducted a correlational study of over 1,000 U.S. workplaces and found a positive association between both types of diversity with sales and revenue and number of customers. So what they were looking for, they were trying to determine how the companies were put together, and they discovered the more diversity in the group, the more successful these select individuals tended to be. These results seem to indicate a positive relationship between diversity in business and a business's bottom line. But as you know, because these data are only correlational, we cannot draw conclusions here regarding one variable causing another. But it looks like diversity causes a successful group. Large groups can also lead to some pretty horrendous behavior among people. During World War II, Japanese troops systematically raped and murdered 400,000 Chinese civilians in Nanking over a 2-week period after the surrender of the city. And the excuse that the Japanese army gave was that some of these individuals may have been Chinese soldiers who had dressed in civilian clothes. So they killed everybody.
They didn't know for sure?
They didn't know who. Yeah, if it was a male that potentially could have been a soldier, they killed them. But they also raped women and murdered children. I'm not going to show you pictures of that. There we go. During the German genocide of the European Jewish population, the systematic murder of the population progressed from shooting and burying to gassing and burning. If you read about the beginning of the war, they were executing these people and burying them in mass graves. And then they realized, oh, wait a minute, if this war ever ends and we lose, then they're going to dig this grave up and they're going to know that we've done this. So they dug up all the people that they shot, and they had to figure out how to get rid of them. Well, initially they tried to put lime on top of them so that they would decompose faster. Are you getting the picture? Then they realized, wait a minute, the bones are still going to be there, and they can still count the number of bodies, and they can still see the bullet wound in the back of the head. We need to do something else. So they dug up all those bodies and they burned them, because piles of ashes, you can't count how many people make up those piles of ashes. So initially, so then they started these death camps where they would take them in. It was too expensive to shoot them. It cost too much money for the bullets. They needed the bullets in the front lines. So they decided the cheapest way to do this is to gas them and to burn the bodies in crematoria. And so that's what they did. And these death camps ran 24 hours a day, where they killed as many people as they possibly could. So who in the world were doing the gassing and the burning? It was other Jewish people that were doing it. I mean, this is your choice. You die today, or you die somewhere down the road. Do you want to live today? Do you want to live for 5 more days, or do you want to die today? Well, that was the choice that they gave. And of course, if you're given a chance to live, then a lot of these individuals chose that instead of dying today. Okay. People perform in groups what they would not have the social support to do alone because of de-individuation. De-individuation is the loss of self-awareness and evaluation apprehension. It occurs in group situations that foster responsiveness to group norms, good or bad. You're hiding behind your glasses.
The sun came out of here.
A group has the power not only to arouse its members, but also to render them unidentifiable. So if we decided that we were going to go beat somebody up, the 5 of us, 6 of us went out and grabbed somebody and beat them, and somebody saw us doing it, they would potentially be able to identify me because I'm the white guy, but the rest of you guys, they wouldn't. It's just a Navajo. Once upon a time, and during a powwow, I was working at it was a Chief Joseph powwow up at Fort Belknap. No, it's a veterans powwow, and I wasn't working on the committee yet. Anyway, I was helping cook and sell food and stuff, and about midnight, I decided, these powwows, if you've ever been to one of them, they go on until 3 or 4 in the morning. And so I decided to go home, and I was tired. We closed down the kitchen, and I took off. So the next day I went to work, or I came back to the powwow to help clean up and set up for the next day. And they said, the police want to see you. I said, what? They said, the police want to see you. And so the cops came over and they started talking to me, and they said, somebody stole all the money, all the money for the powwow. Somebody stole all the money. And they said it was a short white guy and a tall Indian guy. Well, if you've ever been up there, all the Indians are tall. So it was me, theoretically, I was the short white guy. And of course, if I'm around, I've had lots of friends up there, but they were all tall
Indian guys, because, you know, all the Indians are followed, almost all of them from. Anyway, so they assumed it was me since I was like the only white guy at the, well, there were 2 or 3 of us there. So, and I left at midnight, so obviously I was the one that attacked this guy. But what had happened, somebody stabbed him in the side and theoretically stole all of his money.
And they thought that you weren't being part of that.
Yeah, they thought I was the guy that did it. Since, you know, and they had no clue who the Indian guy was because, you know, I had all these students that potentially could have been the Indian guy, or it could have been my, you know, I had a couple buddies that could have been them because they were big. Everybody was big. Everybody's bigger than I am. They used to call me Bigfoot because my feet are so big. If you ever see those the guys that ride all those horses, their feet are like 6s and 7s and 8s, and I've got 12s. Now, put on your glasses. You're blind yourself. I won't tease you. Anyway, so de-individuation. They couldn't figure out who the Indian guy was, but they knew I must be the white guy. Turned out that the guy that was robbed was a white guy. He was actually the one that stole the money, and there was actually no money. He'd been accumulating all this money. They had bingos, and they had people were giving stuff away. They had raffles and whatnot, and he was taking the money and he was spending it. So he hadn't accumulated any money, and it didn't take him very long to figure that one out. Especially after he accused me of doing it. Everybody knew who I was, you know, and here I am donating all this money to the powwow and whatnot, and they figured, why in the world would you be the one? And he's a college professor. This doesn't make any sense. Anyway.
So are we conformists today?
I'm sorry?
Are we conformists today?
No, you look really good today. Wait a minute. No, yeah, we are. Everybody's in gray. I got a green. Here's another green though. Dark. I know. Yes. You should. Where's your orange coat? Where's your orange?
I'm going to Phoenix today. I don't know if that affected.
What did? Okay.
Oh, you're shortcut.
Yeah.
Let's go outside.
I'm going to Phoenix in a little bit.
Probably snowing down there too.
They see you in black clothes. They know you're from up here.
Is that associate with? Did you guys already talk about the no DAPL? Is that the same thing?
Dapple?
No DAPL with the North Dakota Pipeline Acts. Is that
Oh.
the same thing? The group.
De-individuation, the idea that if you're in a group, nobody can identify which one you are. Somebody says it's the big Indian guy, you can't figure out it's Emery.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah. The other problem they had up there was they couldn't figure out which big Indian guy I was partnered with to steal all that money, and it turned out, of course, it was this other white guy that was married into a native family, and he had borrowed money from the powwow fund to help his family, and eventually he just spent all of it. He just used it as an open check, and so he was stealing all the money. Brian Mullen in 1986 content analyzed newspaper accounts of 60 lynchings committed in the United States between 1899 and 1946 and discovered an interesting fact. The more people there were in the mob, the greater the savagery and viciousness with which they killed their victims. So the more people in the mob, the worse it was. Okay, now we're going to talk about your glasses. Similarly, Robert Watson in 1973 studied 24 cultures and found that warriors who hid their identities before going into battle, for example by using face and body paint, were significantly more likely to kill, torture, or mutilate captive prisoners than warriors who did not hide their identities. So if you put on war paint, then you're more likely to want to torture the people that you capture. If we look at the Vikings, we look at the warriors from Greece, we look at warriors from England in the 14th and 15th centuries, they wore helmets. We look at the Japanese samurai. Japanese samurai wore helmets. They wore face masks to keep from getting their eyes poked out or whatever. But as long as they did this, they were more vicious. They tended to be more, because of de-individuation, nobody could identify them. They felt like they were hiding. And of course, people do that with glasses and sunglasses. It's one of the reasons why they gave the guards in the Zimbardo experiment, they gave them reflective sunglasses. You couldn't see their eyes. And because you couldn't see their eyes, they felt like they had anonymity. And because of that anonymity, of course, they were more vicious to the prisoners. If we look at organizations like the Ku Klux Klan, they wear hoods and they wear robes. It is so that you can't identify them. They are anonymous. It's difficult to tell who they are. And this is one of the reasons why that organization does this. They wear hoods. If you've ever watched any of the strange movies about people coming together, they've always got a mask on so that you can't identify them. If you watch select movies, you'll see organizations and everybody's wearing a mask so that nobody can identify them. Of course, the people in the group know exactly who has this mask on or that mask on. But anybody looking in will not be able to identify that select individual. Lynch mobs lynch with impunity. Riots in a faceless mob loot. Large crowds of people around a suicide jumper will bait and jeer the individual to jump. People in crowded cities are more likely to loot and vandalize than people in small, less crowded cities. So this is maybe one of the reasons why cities are so dangerous, because nobody cares, nobody knows who anybody else is. And that de-individuation is taking place and nobody can identify them. De-individuation does not require face-to-face contact. Feelings less, and they have feelings that are less inhibited on social media. That's anonymous. And of course, nobody identifies themselves on social media. They all have a name. They give themselves nicknames.
So how do you say sodium? Sodiums?
What are we talking about?
A different name?
Pseudonym.
Pseudonym.
Cyberspace provides advantages for the free and open discussion of difficult topics, but the cost seems to be a reduction in common civility. And of course, we see that just recently. Of course, Trump has started using the word bullshit in his speeches. I know, I'm shocked. But one of the reasons that Beto O'Rourke was so successful was because he dropped the F-bomb over and over and over again during his run for the Senate in Texas. And he almost won. He only lost by about 20,000 votes, which is really good for a Democrat in Texas. All of a sudden, the civility in the United States has gone out the window. And of course, social media, nobody knows who you are. If nobody knows who you are, you just swear up a storm and call people all kinds of things. People troll. They attack people's ideas. The phenomenon of the internet troll is a modern example of de-individuation made possible by the feelings of anonymity that often go along with being online. And of course, this was taking place especially during the last election by the Russians in St. Petersburg. They were trolling the American social media, and they were attacking people who said positive things about Hillary Clinton or said negative things about Donald Trump, because they were trying to get Trump elected. And they were relatively successful. In January of 2006, the Washington Post had to temporarily shut down its website Post blog after the site was deluged with postings from angry readers, many of whom wrote obscene or insulting comments. Now, what in the world were they talking about? What had happened was the flap was over the claim by the Washington Post reporter that admitted felon Jack Abramoff had made substantial campaign contributions to both major parties. He did. He gave contributions to both parties. He gave a lot more contributions to the Republicans than he did the Democrats. The Democrats went wacko, and they started attacking the Washington Post, which is a relatively liberal newspaper. They were pissed. They were really upset. They called the reporter on this blog. They just screamed at this guy, you know, all capital letters, lots of swear words. Normally, of course, it was a relatively civil situation, but the liberals, the Democrats, were really upset about the fact that they were they said that Abramoff gave to the Democrats as equally as he did to the Republicans. He was a conservative, and he gave to the Republicans like 85% of all the money that he gave to Republicans. So they felt that the Washington Post had made a mistake, and they screamed at the newspaper. And of course, they swore all over the place. And these were the liberals that normally don't do this kind of thing. We see this with conservatives all the time, but we don't see it so much with liberals. And here, all of a sudden, we have the liberals swearing up a storm. Groups will do well only if the most talented member can convince the others that he or she is right, which is not always easy, given that many of us bear a strong resemblance to mules when it comes to admitting that we are wrong. Nobody likes to admit they're wrong. If I make a mistake, I blame somebody else. Usually, it's Denise. I try to find anybody to blame but myself. I'm just like everybody else. I try not to take credit for my mistakes. You undoubtedly know what it's like to try to convince a group to follow your idea, to be faced with opposition and disbelief, and then have to sit there and watch the group make the wrong decision. This happens in committee meetings all the time. Right now I'm dealing with this. I feel that this psychology program needs to be more focused on counseling than in research. I'm sorry. And I've been talking about this for 3 years. And finally, we've got a counseling track, but the research track seems to be getting more and more powerful. Damn it. I know.
I like both.
Research is fine. I'm not saying research is wrong. I'm saying that there's an awful lot of people that want to become counselors.
So basically, this program here underneath psychology doesn't consist of counseling?
It does now.
Oh.
Well, it's because I forced them to add these counseling classes. When the program first started, there was one counseling class.
I've noticed that when I
Yeah.
the class for my next semester, there's not anything. I was like, what am I going to learn? How to talk with people and work with people.
Introduction to Counseling is the class, and it's being offered now. I hope it's being offered in the fall.
So how are we supposed to use this degree with research?
There's a lot of fields that you can go into, but after your bachelor's degree, there's like, you have to find a university that has a program that you're interested in. So like there's house psychology, there's
Don't worry
social
about it.
psychology, there's counseling.
There's now 4.
Good,
I know.
Because
I'm
after-
planning on getting my bachelor. I'm planning on going, keep going just so I can get.
Oh, sure, and that was my argument.
That was the case, like I was telling him, like, I want to go into counseling, but when I go to NAU, like, you're just going to go straight into, like, fields, and then I don't have no training in counseling. So what you're saying that I have to take extra classes on the side
Yeah.
just to catch up with everybody in the master's program. So that's why I think now we have
But
more.
yeah, but now we have
Is that what that sexuality class?
human sexuality is the last class. Yeah. Don't worry, we got it. Okay, we'll see you later. Have fun in Phoenix. You look like somebody that's going to Phoenix. It's okay. It's okay. But initially, if you looked at the checklist that was set up when I first got here, it was all research, and there was the one counseling class. And I argued that we needed to add more, and she said we needed to get the program going, and then we can change it. I know, it's been a long, arduous argument. And unfortunately, of course, we have two different points of view, but I look at what everybody wants to do. You want to go into counseling, you want to go into counseling, you want to go into counseling. One person wants to go into research and everybody else wants to go into counseling. It didn't make any sense to focus on research.
But the research part is really good because we're able to, since I started, I'm able to critique,
Right.
some articles.
Sure.
I'm able to read them much clearer and get understanding. of
Well,
it.
my point was that we should be able to get that with research methods.
Mhm.
That should be taught in research methods.
Mhm.
One class, not. Okay.
So it must be more complicated because when I first came here, they're saying you get your AA degree here and then you transfer over to somewhere else to get your BA. But now you get your BA degree here, now you're going to go somewhere else for your master's
Get your master's
degree.
degree, sure.
So,
But, if you want to be a counselor, we need to offer you as many counseling classes as we can. Because one of the things that you need to figure out is whether you really want to do that. Counseling is tough. Counseling is really tough. You've got to have skin that's as thick as a rhinoceros's skin. Because the person that you're trying to talk to, the person that has a problem, they don't want to fix themselves. They want to stay the way that they are. So what you have to do is you have to be able to take all the abuse from that select individual in order just to talk to them and make them feel better about themselves. Because that person is going to try to do anything than talk about their problems. Their problems hurt. This is painful inside. They don't want to talk about their problems. So they'll call you all flavors of a son of a bitch in order to keep you from counseling them. They'll drop F-bombs every second or third word in order to keep you from delving into their problems. This is the way it works. So you've got to figure out whether you can actually do it or not. You have to be a mean son of a bitch to be able to counsel people, and you have to care about those people. If you only care about the people that live in Kienta, the first client you're going to get is from Phoenix, and that guy's he's not going to act like he won't speak Navajo. He won't. Okay. Anyway, this is what we need. So we need you to figure out whether you can actually do it or not. A lot of counselors are really nice people. I'm not. So I can help you figure out if you want to be a counselor. And that's my point.
I never knew how stressful or hard it could be until last semester when I took that intro to counseling. And now I know why. I had a counselor, school counselor at our high school, and she was only there for 1 year, and she committed suicide the very next year. And I was just like, if she's a counselor, aren't you supposed to prevent suicide?
Right.
And she committed suicide, and I was just like,
If she commits suicide, everybody should be committing suicide. This is a counselor, and
Yeah.
she offed herself.
I kind of don't want to be a counselor anymore.
You don't have to kill yourself. But if you want to, no.
Oh my God.
You need to figure out whether you can do it or not. And the practice, I think the practice is good. You need to do that. Sometimes if somebody's a little bit too sensitive, they can't handle it. But, that's the only way we'll find, you can find out. Otherwise, you're wasting your time. You might as well go into, something else, anything else. Research. Which is good. I'm not saying research is bad, but they set up the program as a research program. This reservation needs counselors. That's what they need. And they need people that want to help. So you've got to want to help, and you've got to be tough enough to be able to handle it. And if you've ever gone through something, you need to deal with that before you start counseling people. It's just the way it works. Don't worry, We've got a counseling track now. We've got more counseling
It's a good
classes.
class though.
It is a
I've
good-
actually experienced what she was talking about throughout my teenage years of being a counselor.
Right.
And I was a pretty bad kid back then. And the counselor that I used to go see, well, one of them, I see several counselors, and one of them told me, I have a feeling that one of these days that you're going to become part of the program that I studied. And people that go through stuff like that in life are actually
Right.
counselors.
Yeah, but you have to deal with it
But,
first.
but you have to understand a lot of the situation that people go through first before you can go and
Exactly.
actually decide to want to do that.
Right.
And I've been through a lot of stuff in life, and I can pretty much see what's going on right here. And when they opened this program, from what I understand, you know, they were saying that it's going to relate to the Navajo government and some stuff like that. So I figured that the program here would go good underneath the structure of what the Navajos do with the camping programs and also the government like that.
Right.
And so I figured, you know, it would be a good idea. But yet, it just dawned on me, like recently, that the majority of the classes I'm taking for this program is actually doing research. And I'm just like, okay.
Yeah, well, not really. There's how many research classes? You've got Christine's research class, you've got research methods.
What was the other one?
Sarah's got a new cognitive class, which is about research. But see, you don't have
Statistics,
to,
yeah.
you don't have to take those classes. Well, you have to take Christine's class, and you have to take research methods, you have to take statistics. But the rest of the classes, like social psychology, health psychology, all of this has to do with reading people. All this has to do with understanding people. And you already understand people. But you know, we talk about reactance, and we talk about social facilitation and de-individuation. You know, this is all stuff that you're going to see out there. You've already seen it. Here, I mean, I'm talking about it. You probably go, yeah, I already know all this stuff. But I never gave a name to it. So you know, that's a. Is that off?